No color. You have
Thank
nothing, Hein.
We are live.
Okay. Three, two, one. Hello, I'm Justin Freed, and this is episode 144 of inThirty. It'll be our grossest episode ever. That's a math teacher joke for all of you math teachers who are out there listening to the best math teacher in the country, my co-host, Haim Cohen of HaimTime.com. He's here.
Hello, hello.
Paul Shapiro is here
Hey.
from Boston and of PaulNShapiro.com. And I just noticed, because I harassed him before we got on air to change the color of his lower third, he made a slight error in his lower third. He's now his domain name is now PawnShapiro.com. But please, if you're watching, don't forget the L. And then with us for 2 weeks in a row, second time, Drew Pitchford. Hello,
Hey.
Drew. You know, Drew, you have no title in your lower third, so why don't you give one now, and you can flesh out why we invite you on, especially around WWDC time.
How about Warhammer?
I don't even know what
Okay,
that
I'll go with
is.
that.
Okay, Drew Pitchford Warhammer. There you go. That's his title. Okay, he's an iOS developer, and I would say he's been ordained by me top Apple commenter.
No. You don't know why Warhammer is so good. He is from
Is it a
alma
sports
mater.
reference? Is it a sports
He is
reference?
yes.
Okay.
He is an alma mater of Tim Cook.
Well, what I thought it was War Eagle. I mean, how many?
It is War Eagle for Auburn, yeah.
Okay, so
So I was wrong, but still, he graduated from the. You're graduating from the school that Tim Cook went to.
he graduated. He's on to his master's. So this the top of the show again is getting very bulky. So I will lay out the cookie crumbs that we will follow to get back on track. We'll do a little bit of iOS 8 talk, a little bit of OS 10.10. Oh, I'm sorry, 10.9 talk. No, wait, am I missing one? It is
10.10.
It's Yosemite 10.10. It's very exciting. And then finally we'll get on to what amounted to the one more thing, although that rhetoric wasn't used. Apple's new programming language, Swift. So let's get right into it. iOS 8. Is it beautiful, Hein? Does it make you? Is it how much were you chafing under the weight of the inelegant Android?
I have
Android?
everything that's like I've had that for 4 years now. I've
Paul-
had that for 6 years now.
Paul, as someone who was wavering between iOS and Android in the past, did seeing iOS 8 and its feature set make you feel more comfortable having chosen to stay on the Apple bandwagon, or less comfortable? What gives?
It's kind of irritating that they're playing catch up with Android. So in a way, I'm a little upset with it because it wasn't so much new things as much as catching up with Android.
Okay, and the way they caught up, Drew, is it fair to say that a lot of it is that under the direction of Craig Federighi, they are kind of playing ball with everyone now. They've opened up some of their APIs in a way that was surprising, beyond the system-wide keyboard and the lot. It sounds like that's what the catch-up comes from. And is it a cultural shift? Is it a technical shift? And why?
I think it's just
now?
a natural evolution. I mean, they didn't prioritize things like third-party keyboards early on, but obviously iOS now is mature enough that those kind of things probably are needed, and so they addressed them with iOS 8.
Now, I'm of the opinion that they weren't needed. That if they could have gotten away with not adding a system-wide keyboard for another year or two, that they could have made it so that apps could still not directly access one another, even in a siloed way. So, is it a result that of them internally just having so much time to kind of twiddle their thumbs that they chose these things, or is this a strategy to open iOS? I mean, they don't have to, right? Can we all agree on that? They don't have to. It'd still be okay if they didn't.
But Justin, have you ever used either SwiftKey or a swipe type keyboard?
I have, and I like it. I've downloaded the standalone apps.
So that was the thing that they've been saying for years. Why can't they do the predictive text? Another thing, it sounds like this should have been done ages ago. There was no more RAM usage or anything like that. It was just something they didn't do. They held onto this keyboard, which is a great keyboard. No one has ever doubted the iPhone keyboard. But why couldn't we do why can't we do voice recognition on the keyboard? Why can't we have swipe? Why can't we have predictive text?
So, Drew, do you have evidence to suggest that this is actually a technical evolution, or is this something strategically, internally, that they just decided, hey, we'll pull the trigger on this now? I mean, has the operating system been hardened in a way that now they're able to do this, or are they just saying, okay, now we choose
Yeah,
to?
I think it's just like I said, the natural evolution of it. I mean, obviously Apple's kind of slower in how they do things. I mean, look, it was iOS 2 before they introduced copy and paste, right? So it was iOS 4 before they did multitasking, iOS 5 before they did Notification Center, and not non-obtrusive notifications. So they obviously operate on a little bit of a slower schedule, but I think it's just part of their natural plan.
So, Paul, the frustration that you were talking about, is it seeing it come to fruition and knowing that it could have been there for the thousands of keystrokes that you typed beforehand, and that they're just getting around to it now?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's also, I sort of feel like they draw it out for profit purposes. So it's wait till you see what we have next, when it's something we should have had already.
Well, we always say that Apple takes an idea and makes it beautiful and makes it elegant and makes it all this other stuff. I don't know if it's beautiful or elegant. It's a keyboard that has functionality. I don't know how you can make it more elegant. Do you think Apple, and one of my underlying themes of the whole show is, Apple, as of Sunday, couldn't fix iMessage, had no cloud presence, no one trusted the iCloud, and now all of a sudden they're quote-unquote doubling down, and this is miraculously going to work.
So
it's not elegant.
It seems to me then that under Craig Federighi's reign, that they're getting a little more geeky, and they're getting a little more, I don't know, Android-like in what they're willing to undertake. And I really think that this comes from the top down, and that I'm not saying this wouldn't have happened anyway, but I have a feeling that there's not the roadblock of getting through Steve Jobs' auteur perspective on the operating system. So these things happen all the more quickly. Drew, can you comment on whether or not Apple's doing what Paul said, that Apple's doing this for profit's sake, or do you think that it? I mean, they could purchase a couple of countries outright. I mean, where do you think they come down on holding out features for the sake of money in the bank?
Well, I mean, ultimately, their main goal is profit. I mean, they are a business. You can't forget that. But whether or not, and we're saying a lot about keyboards. I mean, that's just really the small part. The bigger aspect of it is the extensions. The fact that they're now allowing a better, inter-app communication, if you will, but it's done in what I would say is an Apple way. You still have to go through the OS to the other app. You can't just have apps talking to each other. So I think it's very secure, but that's very Apple-esque in how it's accomplished.
Is this because to my ears it sounds a lot like they're multitasking, the way they implemented multitasking in the past. It was only for a certain subset of functionality that had to be blessed by the operating system, and outside of that scope you really couldn't multitask. Is this still about battery life and security, or like?
No, this is a security issue. I mean, I loved having the ability to share to just about any app that wanted to add its name to the list. And the problem on Android side is that every app can literally add itself to the list, and there is no way to take it off. It seems like with iOS 8, you can go into the apps and its specific permissions and say allow sharing, and that would make it easier.
Does anyone remember the "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC" ad where PC had like the Secret Service guy standing next to him after Vista was released, and every sentence that he spoke, the Vista Secret Service guy would say, "Allow or deny, allow or deny." It seems like in order to implement Apple's view of these things, it's going to be like that when you first launch an app. It's going to be location services, share sheets, multitasking. I mean, is this?
Well, do you have to approve the share sheets?
Well,
my understanding was just that it would work as an extension. The OS take care of it, and the only part that there's a little, like what you're saying, would be the keyboards. Dealing with internet connectivity and that kind of thing. But as far as like what they demonstrated on stage, where like the photo app with the water image, it just kind of popped up within photos, right, and then disappeared, and there was no permissions.
So, but the permission may have had to have been granted initially for third-party
Justin,
apps.
I think you're right. Justin, I think Justin is right in this case. When you get a new phone, it's going to ask you, do you want a new app? Do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? Because for exactly that reason, I'm telling you, you take a picture and you hit share on my Nexus 5. There's about 30 different applications I can share to.
But okay,
that I don't necessarily want.
Someone's got to flesh out for me how this is. I mean, I can do that right now in iOS 7. I mean, if, for instance, I have the GoDaddy app installed on my phone, and for some reason the GoDaddy app is registered as being able to open PDFs and certain images. So if I want to share a PDF, I have to scroll left through all of my PDF opening apps, and GoDaddy's there. What is the difference here? I mean, there's something more to the extensions than just being on the share sheets. It's missing. It doesn't have to go through some intermediary step for the user too. Right?
I think from a more technical standpoint, it is the ability to, for instance, with the photo example, instead of exporting the photo into another app and then having 2 copies, you just take that one photo and share it between apps. Now, I mean, I agree with you on the end user. As far as like my mother, for instance, it's not going to make any difference to her. I mean, she's not going to know the difference. She's always been able to open this photo in several different apps. But I guess from a technical perspective, it cleans things up a little bit.
Okay, it seems like it also opens the door for things that we haven't thought of yet, which is like if, so it makes sense for things almost like HealthBook, where if the Fitbit app wants to push information to HealthBook, rather than doing it through the internet and using like the API for HealthBook to be associated with the Fitbit account, maybe those apps can communicate on a data level that way.
Is Passbook still a thing? We're talking about HealthBook,
but by the way, it's not called HealthBook. I apologize. It's called Health. But okay. So where are we on time, Heinz?
For the Health Kit?
No. But hold on. I want to just last thing on the keyboards, and this ties into security. Apple has always been really, really good with security, and you can't knock them for that. So good that LastPass came out and said, we want the same functionality in Android, but we can't do it because of sandboxing. So if you don't know, in Android, if you're authenticated via LastPass, it draws another screen that says fill in. So I can see LastPass immediately using the Touch ID open sensor and a specific keyboard to put in a master password to automatically fill. And that's a huge thing for security, but we can move on.
Okay, well, it also means that it opens the door to huge problems. Yeah. But because the App Store is vetted for these issues, maybe it'll be better overall. But it seems that this is an opening of iOS, and every year they roll back the APIs a little bit, and it seems like this is the type of thing where it means most to the developers and the quality of the apps, and it's not really about the end user experience in the immediate sense when they open up an iPhone 6 for the first time. They're not going to be saying, oh, iOS 8 is so open, but you'll feel it in a more subtle way. So, of course, we can move on to talking about OS 10 now. OS 10.
There's nothing else?
10. Well, there's tons more, but a lot of it has to do with handoff and continuity, and I think we can have some.
Fine. We're at 13 minutes, so.
Okay, so 10.10 we expected a little bit of iOSification of the GUI. It happened, but I think the extent of the unity between the mobiles and the laptops and the desktops, it surprised me, frankly. Was anyone else surprised to see the caller ID notifications and the lot being built into Yosemite?
Let me throw down the negative first, which just bothers me, is because, like I said, the day before WWDC, iMessage didn't work. Like, there were so many people complaining about how iMessage is so fundamentally broken, and miraculously, it's now going to be fixed.
What do you mean?
I think when you say plenty of people, I think you mean a lot of nerds that, like me, who are doing software stuff. I mean, the friends I have that aren't technical, they've never had a problem with iMessage.
Well,
I mean,
when I was using
iMessage,
let's pause here. Does the world at large understand the difference between the green dot and the blue dot?
That's what I'm saying. They probably don't. And even if they do, the few that deal with switching to an Android phone and losing some messages, I mean, yeah, they get aggravated about that. But I think to say at large that people thought iMessage didn't work is a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I had to parse what you were saying to figure out what news story you were referring to.
No, but there's more than that. I mean, there's a lot more than that. You have the whole iCloud backend. But look, iMessage, this is exactly what Hangouts does for me now. the whole Chrome notifications and everything else. It looks like I've had all this functionality now.
Okay.
And I don't think that Apple did it in any prettier way.
This is how it's
fine.
broken. This is
good.
how it's broken. It still requires a Bluetooth connection to the phone for all of the telco stuff. So this idea that it imports SMSs into OS 10 and is probably on a per device basis still does nothing to kind of chip away at the utility of something like Google Voice, which receives the SMS at the cloud level, then disperses it to your devices or to your browsers. So I already have this functionality of getting call notifications on my Mac because my calls are going to the cloud first and then being distributed thusly. The idea that the phone is still the cornerstone of the communication, that's still the problem. I don't get it. I think that this is where Apple, maybe they haven't jumped the shark, and this will be neat for some people, but it isn't. I don't think that this is super useful. I think this is more like a proof of concept thing. I think it's going to get in the way, and I think that people will use the piece their Apple hardware for a speakerphone, but this just indicates that the Google Voice or IP everything way of communicating is better than using SMS and regular phone.
Well, maybe on a technical level, but I think for regular people, like my mother would not. Again, I go back to her, but she wouldn't know how to set up a Google anything and have it go to the cloud. No, as far as she knows, when she unwraps her new iPhone later in the year, and she has a Mac, and all of a sudden I can call her, and it comes up on the Mac, she's amazed. So again, from a technical standpoint, I understand what you're saying, but I think
FaceTime.
Apple sells to.
You should FaceTime audio her because then it goes from the cloud to her devices, and even if her
but you have to have all that set up before to make that happen, which she doesn't want to deal with. That's what Apple takes out.
I agree with Drew because here's the thing: people come home from work, they connect their phone to the charger, and then they go around doing whatever. Mm-hmm. I do the same thing. If it's as long as it's within the 30 feet or whatever the Bluetooth range is, nobody's going to know a difference, and that's the key.
I think it's gonna break a lot. Just think of it. It has to connect to the cell network, then via Bluetooth, and then your computer has to be on too. Versus being just a direct connection from the internet on down. I do not think this is a feature that people are in general going to get excited about. And now we go to Paul. Paul, are you going to set up at work for it to work this way? I mean, it does maybe for certain freelancers, and I do this already, but it's from the cloud down, not from the phone to the computer.
Just when I switched from Android to my iPhone, one of the things I was upset about losing was I was running like a few apps so I could like manage my text messaging from my computer, stuff like that, and it was something I was really using, and when I originally switched, I started missing.
Okay, but so to me, this is the difference between This is a show about SMS versus IP communications. It's like when I sent a URL to a client from my computer via text message on their phone today, and using the Google Voice extension in Chrome. Now, to them, that looks like magic, but it makes perfect sense to me. It's no different than if they had Hangouts set up properly. Anyway, I just think that this thing is cool, but it's like this is a stopgap to IP-based communication.
Well, weird. Last thing on Hangouts. I saw the leave. I kept on telling my students, and my students watched the keynote with me. And when who was it? Did the voicemail? Craig Federici did the voice Hangout thing, and it showed the little waveform. All my students basically said,
"That's WhatsApp."
No, they're like, "We're bringing voicemails back. Why can't it translate it for us?" What we got away from voicemails, and now we're bringing it back. Now I'm just going to sit there, and instead I'm just going to leave voicemails for everyone because it's easier to do that.
You're right. In that sense, it's wacky. I think that the messaging thing is getting so convoluted that that's how iMessage ultimately won out. It's if you stick with Apple hardware, your messaging experience is really strong. And I know that I can get my grandma on her iPad Retina, and my mom, and I can do it from my OS 10 machines, and it works well enough. And I never have to tell them to make sure they're signed into Google or the rest of it. So I think that it's interesting and it's kind of cool technology. I don't think these things are killer apps, and I also think going into like handoff and continuity. Again, I don't think that the space between the mobile device and the desktop is greater than Apple wants it to be. And this idea of like handing off a web page is kind of interesting, but how often do you do that? I don't like. It's just like this seems like advancement for the sake of advancement, and it's not features that are on a day-to-day basis people are going to use. We're talking about OS 10 to be very clear, and continuity. I mean, Heim,
here's the thing.
How often do you want your open tabs in Chrome on your desktop to show up on your Nexus 5? All of them.
Well, to be honest, I'm not in the position where I say, oh, here I'm going like a commuter. Oh, I'm at the office and let me save this. I'm going to pick it up on my phone because Chrome can do that. But I realize it's a little hard, and I just don't have any care to do it. I rather. Yeah, it doesn't. You're right.
Paul and Drew, where do you guys come down on the handoff and the continuity stuff?
I'll let Paul go first.
I don't. I mean, with the Chrome feature where you can sync your tabs between devices, I don't typically end up using that. What I do use is I end up like sending myself a link to my own email, or using like a Pocket or Instapaper-like service, or it just doesn't really work with my flow, and I'm not sure if that's the case with other people as well.
So Drew,
it's definitely a feature that people are. I mean, Google's doing it too.
I'm like chafing. I'm sorry. I cannot keep myself. This is because what people are used to doing and what works better is to go to the cloud first as the repository for the information, and then going to the cloud, back to the cloud when they want it. That's what
I think
works.
What Apple's trying to get at, though, is to take that thought process out. Not think, go to the cloud. Just think, let me go to whatever device I got handy and be there. What they want is that continuous experience where you're not thinking about how do you technically get there. It's just there.
Okay. So
Which parlays into my answer. I was going to say that, like with iCloud tabs, since it was introduced, I've used it like crazy. I love it.
Okay.
Again, Heim says that iCloud sucks and that people don't like it and don't trust it. I've loved it and used it every day since it was released. So, I mean, I'm totally on board with handoff and everything, continuity, because it is, again, is that continuous experience where no matter what device I pick up, all of my stuff is there right where I left off from my other device, which was more handy when I was in school, admittedly. I mean, now that I'm at work, things are segmented a bit, but especially when I was in school. I mean, just being able to go straight from iPad to iPhone to Mac between the house, the bus, and the classroom, I loved it, and it was really productive.
When you choose the cloud platform, when your company chooses the cloud platform, Drew, which are you going to choose? Are you going to choose this new iCloud, or are you going to go with Google, or are you going to go with AWS?
I mean, I would choose iCloud, but I mean, I don't have any say over that.
But it's just like AWS is in no way comparable to the goals that iCloud is trying to. You're not gonna run your next web app on iCloud. But maybe the thing that I'm missing here is that it's a lot of, and because I don't do this, I don't use my iPad like that. Like, is it going between the iPhone and the iPad? Is that really the important thing? So that if you want to go to the bigger screen, your tabs are all there. Is that what I'm not considering?
Documents, photos, yeah. Being able to switch from one device to the other without ever thinking about, I need to make sure I mail this link to myself, or I send this photo to myself, or whatever. Just the fact that it's there without having to think about it is what I like. And my experience is what people that I know that are not technical, they also like that.
Okay, and I'm sure that the Apple, they have so much data on how people use computers that I could only imagine. So maybe it makes sense. So let's go a little bit deeper then into 10.10. I think, and via iCloud, which Heim, you're right to bash, opening up the file system in the way that they have, going back to it feels kind of like, what was it called? Was it iDrive? What was the
iCloud Drive?
iCloud Drive. So they're going back to that, and they're essentially adding a file system in the cloud to the iPhone, something that they've resisted doing up until now. I'm not going to put a single file that I care about in iCloud. I'm not going to happen. And Heim, I guess you're the same.
Because you've been beaten down so much that when you have to make a decision. Look, I listened to Marco and John Siracusa rant about how Apple just can't do cloud right. I mean, for weeks on end. And I want to hear what they have to say this week, but I can't see how in 48 hours they did a complete about face, and this is just miraculously going to work. It's going to have to be beaten down, and hopefully, the one in North Carolina. So So
How
I
much
mean,
storage am I getting?
5 gigs for free. And
5 gig.
200 gigs for $1 a month. Whatever it is. Drew, you seem like you're most willing to trust this. Do you know what it's like to have all of your photos archived, even at a low resolution, in Google Plus, searchable by keyword, because Google has processed the photos, by color, by date, without ever having to worry about it going from device to device? I mean, compare that to what Apple's offering now via
Well,
iCloud.
no, not with Google in the sense of the cloud. I mean, to put it this way, every photo I've ever taken since iOS 5 was released in fall 2011
Mm.
is now on my Mac, right? I mean, PhotoStream has pushed it all to my iPads that I've had, to my new phones. Whenever I get them, they're immediately there. And on my Mac, I've got in iPhoto every month of photos since October of 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I have no worry about iCloud because it's done what it's supposed to do. It pushes it to the different devices, and I've never lost one.
I just find that
The problem is, Drew,
you lose that Mac,
haven't.
you lose everything.
But Drew, you haven't dealt with the person who has never connected their iPhone to the computer, or what has ran out of storage on their iPhone and wants to remove the pictures. And I'm not saying that Google does it better, or Dropbox, or any of them, but at least Google Plus says we'll upload it on Wi-Fi while it's sleeping, and it will always be there. Granted, a lower resolution.
The thing that's
But
missing
it's
here
there.
is that
Well, I mean, I haven't connected my phone to my computer in a long time either. Actually, in years, probably. But I have run into the situation with my grandmother where she ran out of space and wanted to delete photos. And that's just, I mean, I don't know how to answer that except to say, she deleted some that she didn't care about because she just kind of takes a bunch of them and then, they're digital, I can delete them later. So I've run into that in a way.
if you lose that Mac, unless you could use any type of backup service that you want. You could do Crash Plan, which I think is great. But if you lose that Mac, there's no searchable, offloaded, cloud-based archive of that stuff. It's device to device to device, only with the cloud being the intermediary. And that's what I think is not a. I don't like that method. I want
Well,
the
that's
cloud.
what they're fixing now, right? That's what they changed to iOS 8.
I guess, but it's at a file system level now, which is good for files, but not for photos. I don't think you need a file system for photos. It's like Carousel and Dropbox and Google Plus Photos. It doesn't look at the photos at a file level. It looks at them at a photo level. And I don't know if this new version of iCloud is going to do that, or if it's going to treat them like it's going to treat the photo as a photo, or it's going to be like a .jpeg, and you have to move it around as you want it.
From what I remember seeing on stage, it was like a photo, right? He pulled up the phone or whatever with the iPad maybe, and he looked at years and years of PhotoStream photos that are now in the cloud. And you can search it right there in the Photos app, and they're all in the cloud for free, apparently.
Hi, where are we on time?
We got 2.5.
2.5 minutes. So we're not going to get swiftly into Swift. So we'll just, I guess, we can can it or maybe break this off into another episode.
Well, okay. Look, I was going to say, overall thoughts, I liked OS 10. I'll be upgrading in the fall. I do like the fact that there was no hardware change. So the only people that get proverbially screwed are the people who have an iPhone 4. Which
How
I really
impressed are
like.
you by the overarching support of the older devices? The iPhone 4 is not going to get iOS 8, but 80% of Macs are going to be able to run 10.10.
I don't need to buy a new computer. I've been saying I want to buy a new computer.
Right.
I don't think I'm going to do it. I'm going to squeeze another year out of it.
I actually think I don't need to buy a computer. Mine will upgrade fine, but I can't stand the idea of a translucent type of operating system on a non-retina display. So I'm thinking I'll probably upgrade anyway.
And Paul, are you looking forward to seeing Helvetica New instead of a Lucida Grand? Because that's the other big change, the operating system font. That is a big change. That's what you're going to be looking at, Paul.
What's the font?
The font was Lucida, I thought it was. Anyway, okay. This has been I timed myself out of getting to Swift. This has been episode 144 of inThirty, doing a recap of WWDC. Thank you for listening.
Bye, everybody.